Unit 11, Part 1, Quantifiers. So last unit, Unit 10, we began on quantifier logic, also known as predicate logic. And what did we learn? We learned that we were introduced to the motivation for why we are engaging in a new logical system. We were doing sentential logic, units 1 to 9, now we're doing quantifier logic. We analyze what were simple sentences, which were taken as wholes, into their parts, right? And what did we learn? We learned that a sentence which used to get a simple capital letter, like Dan is Australian, is now in this new logic, in quantifier logic, broken up into certain elements. The most basic thing we do is distinguish a sentence into its subjects and predicates, right? So Dan is Australian, it's the verb, in this sentence is. In most sentences, it's always the verb that indicates where the subject ends and the predicate begins. So the boy wearing the hat is wearing blue. Stupid, but the boy wearing the hat, that's all the subject, right? It's a long subject. Is wearing blue. The verb tells you that what is it I'm speaking of? The boy in the hat. What am I saying of him? That is, what am I predicating? Right? He is wearing blue. Okay, whatever. That's subjects and predicates. Okay, so this new logic, predicate logic, quantifier logic. Dan is Australian. We isolate the subject, Dan, the predicate is Australian, right? What we do is one of the fundamental elements of our logic is the propositional function. So we obtain the propositional function by deleting the name and replacing it with a variable. So the propositional function for Dan is Australian in English is X is Australian, right? Symbolization of that in our language is uppercase A, lowercase x, okay? That's the predicate letter, and this is the individual variable, different kind of variable than the variables we learned in sentential logic. They were P and the Q and the R, they were sentential variables, taking as substitution instances entire sentences. This is an individual variable, taking as substitution instances individual constants, which is the first letter of a name. D for Dan, B for Barry. So I can have as substitution instances of this propositional function uppercase A, lowercase b, means Barry is Australian, right? Or this is the symbolization of my original sentence, replacing the individual variable x with the individual constant d, uppercase A, lowercase d. That's my symbolization for Dan is Australian. But what I said in the Unit 10 lectures was the really cool thing about this logic is, remember, propositional functions, it's crucial to keep in mind that they are not complete sentences. They are neither true nor false. They're incomplete of themselves. The really cool thing about, I'll call it quantifier logic for this lecture, since it's Unit 11 on quantifiers. The really cool thing about this logic is it gives us the formal resources to express a whole range of sentences in English which we couldn't do before, to actually capture the more refined logical structure of, in particular, quantifier sentences. Okay, so what are quantifiers? Now just talking about English, right? So keep track of when I'm talking about English and when I'm talking about the formal language of our predicate logic, of our quantifier logic. In English, many of our sentences involve expressions which tell you of how many things a predicate is true, right? So if I say, some of you will fail, right? Some of you will fail this course, right? The predicate of that sentence, the predicate of that sentence is X will fail, right? The propositional function will be fx equals X will fail, right? Or ... will fail. That's the predicate. That is what I'm saying. If this was a sentence with a subject, I'd be saying it of, that is what I'd be saying of the subject. Okay, so X will fail, fx equals X will fail. That is the predicate. But in my sentence, some of you will fail, or compare the sentence, all of you will fail, these sentences don't have a subject, right? They involve quantifier statements. Some, the word some in some of you will fail, or the word all in all of you will fail, that doesn't refer to a subject, right? I'm not picking out an individual, which would make my statement a singular sentence. Singular sentences are when you predicate of an individual, somebody named. Nor are these sentences categorical sentences, because again, it is not the case that my subject is a class. A categorical sentence is a subject-predicate sentence where the subject is an entire class, like Australians are surfers, Americans are cool, Russians are terrible, whatever you want. Okay, so these sentences, those two sentences, some of you will fail, all of you will fail. The expressions some and all do not refer to a subject. What do they do? What is their function in the language? Okay, so I want you to have a sense of how, right, the reason why this new logic is cool is because it allows us to capture or grasp much more of the structure, something that's true of the actual language that we use, the English language that we use, right? Those expressions in English have a nature. The word some and the word all in the expressions, some of you will fail, all of you will fail, right? They don't function as names. They have another function, and when you understand those sentences, you are understanding the nature of those expressions to do something else than name. They perform another function. What is it that they do? They speak to of how many things the propositional function is true, right? They tell you of how many things the predicate is true, right? They say, some of you will fail. I'm not naming any particular individual. I'm not picking you out and saying you, well, insert your name here, will fail. I'm saying that someone will fail. I'm saying, and this is a sentence. This is a statement. It's a sentence. It's something that is capable of being true or false, right? Some of you will fail has truth conditions. Namely, so long as one of you does in fact fail, then my statement is true. Similarly, if I say all of you will fail, it requires all of you to fail. But it's a sentence. So the thing that I said in the Unit 10 lectures that was really cool about this logic, Quantifier Logic, is the other way to make sentences with these basic elements, propositional functions. So we obtain the propositional function by starting with a singular sentence, Dan is Australian, replace the name, the variable, X is Australian, the symbolization of which is AX. It's incomplete, it's not true or false by itself. You can make a sentence one way, replace the individual variable with an individual constant. You've got a substitution instance, Dan is Australian is a substitution instance of X is Australian. One way to make a sentence, one way to complete a propositional function to get something true or false. But there's this other cool way, right? And it is prefixing a quantifier to the propositional function to yield a quantifier statement. This is a simple propositional function as opposed to a complex propositional function like AX hook SX, right? If X is an Australian, then X is a surfer. That's complex because it has the hook, so it has structure, has more structure. This is a simple propositional function. That's as simple as you can get, right? It has elements, but that's a basic block for this kind of unit, the propositional function. And if you prefix this propositional function with a quantifier, you get a simple quantified statement. So what do these say? You've got to, very, very crucial, you learn to read these. This says, for all X, X is Australian. Let me say now, you can also read this as for any X. That's also the universal quantifier, right? The expression in English, anybody will do. What's the logical structure of that sentence? Anybody will do. Let's say dx equals x will do. Anybody will do, the logical structure is this. For all x, x will do. Anybody will do. No, let's make it anything will do. Anything will do. Dx, x will do. It's anything will do is for all x, x will do. Okay, because when I say any, I mean you take any one of the things that exist, and I'm telling you that it will do, right? So, point is, any gets the universal quantifier. Don't be confused about any. So you can read this as any, or you can read it as all. Perhaps the more natural interpretation, which I start using to start getting familiar with these quantifiers, is for all. For all x, right? It's incomplete. It says for all x, what? You know, I've got to complete it. You don't make sentences just with a quantifier by itself. But what are we doing? We're prefixing the propositional function with the quantifier, and we're getting it something complete. Wow, a complete sentence, right? This is incomplete, but it says x is Australian. Now I'm saying for all x, what? X is Australian. Notice that this variable is bound by this quantifier. Another topic introduced in one of the later sections of Unit 11, the scope of a quantifier, the idea of bound versus free variables. We'll get to that. But we have a sentence, right? For all x, x is Australian, right? Or if I prefix the propositional function, x is Australian, with the existential quantifier, I get another quantifier statement, right? This says, how do you read this? There exists an x such that x is Australian, right? A more colloquial way of saying this is, there is an Australian, or an Australian exists. Those are both, if you have them in English and you ask to translate them, that's how you translate them. The existential quantifier and the propositional function. Okay? That's how you do that.